Perfect. All right then. Hello, Namaskar. Good evening, everybody. I am Sheenam, and we are back with another interactive session on Pratha, which is a social media offshoot of Kabe Varsha, which is a global community of young people, probably from the NYKS mostly, with an objective of Indic Renaissance and youth development and engagement. And today, we are here to discuss something which is very, very fundamental. We are all a part of it. You know it or you don't know it, but it's been ingrained in us probably from the time that we have been calling this as a nation and we have an education system going on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we were believed and we were almost trained to be a class of persons who were supposed to be Indian in color and blood, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. I'm quoting those famous lines from Macaulay's Minute in 1835, which became a fundamental root of Indian education system. And we are more than delighted to have Professor Lavanya Vemsani with us, an extremely recognized scholar, and I don't think we could have anybody better than her for such discussion. So, a warm welcome, ma'am, to
Namaste,
Pratha.
everyone. Thank you so much, Sheenam, for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Absolute pleasure and privilege, ma'am. Okay, so let's dive right into the topic, the subject that we have in hand here, which is how Macaulay has influenced our education system and the subject of even Indic education or Indic curriculum. So let's start with the B.R. Ambedkar's words when he said in Pakistan or partition of India, when he speaks of the dichotomy which goes behind a country, which goes behind the formation of a nation, and where he mentions about a nation is a living soul, a spiritual principle, and there are two things that constitutes its soul, which is the spiritual principle, and one is the past, and another is the present. So let's just first come to the very first deliberation that I have here is, how do you perceive the idea of nation, and how does that meaning change and translate over times, and how does it change for a colony, for some place which has been colonized, or some place which is a colonizer? So how does that meaning translate over such times?
Right. I'm really glad you brought up Ambedkar. He has been right on a number of issues: language, culture, many issues in regards to the nation, and to the point. This has been noticed by a lot of our nation leaders. They understood, and they have written, especially Tagore had written in his book Gora. He says India is not in Marshman's history book. So the history is not representative of India. That has been established. There is no question about it. It's colonial history, colonized history. So the narrative had been India is kept captive. So the history has to be released. If the nation has to be released, the history has to be released. So of course, India became independent, but Indian history hasn't become independent yet. It's still kept captive. To throw the shackles out. So the first thing, as you noticed, and I'm in full agreement with all these nationalists, Ambedkar, Tagore, and everyone who had written about this. And Ambedkar is to the point in saying that the nation's soul is in its past and present. And when the history is kept captive, we don't have the past. If we don't have a clear past, how can we have a present? Our present is crippled. So we have a crippled present, and how can we prepare for the future? So the past is garbled up and present is crippled, and the future is going to be also less optimal. So it's very important for a nation to have a truthful and fact-based history. It's necessary. And colonialists, of course, they realized this. To control a nation is to control the minds of its people. That's through the history, which they have done masterfully. So it's for India. Has been only 70 years, but efforts should be put to correct this narrative. It's very important for India to progress. India cannot achieve her full progress or full self without realizing history, without understanding the history. So that's very, very important. It's an urgent need. It's as important as the Make in India initiative.
Absolutely, absolutely, ma'am. So, it's good that we started up on realizing the importance of history, because I'm going to take you a little back, and I would want to come. Let's connect our past to the present scenario. How do you feel about the decision of the then government Nehruvian dispensation to continue that Western outlook, which had been actually devised for some other reasons, to convert our spirits in some ways, to change what we look for and what we aspire for, and also what we stand for eventually as a nation. So, how do you feel about continuing that Western outlook, and some sort of a selective erasure of what was truly ours, or probably our ways of being, or our ways of being taught? So, were we trying to ape the West? Were we trying to come at par with it? Or, where does it leave us today after 70, 75 years of independence?
we it's sad state of history, but we have to admit it. If we don't admit it, we cannot correct it.
Right.
So the history, because it began under colonial rule, it has these colonial features. So we have become independent. It's important to correct it. Our history should represent this independent spirit. It hasn't. It has still continued the spirit of this colonialism. For a nation to progress, self discovery is important. So if the history is not discovered, if it is not fact based, it's not going to help. So Indian history still remains under the framework of invader versus indigenous. It this framework influences all aspects. The invaders have influenced every aspect. Of course, not true. It's all a constructed reality. But how long can a history be carrying, Indian history be carrying this weight of invader versus indigenous? There should be a new understanding, new way of bringing out the truth into Indian history. So these frameworks have actually nailed Indian history and India down. It has to be released. The spirit has to be freed for India to realize its potential. So it's already too late, but it's important to change it. The framework has to be changed. It's necessary, and it's right. It has been noted by everyone. The history has been a captive, and it hasn't been released yet. Still under
Absolutely.
the frameworks. Yeah, it's crushed under the weight of these frameworks.
Yeah, and since we're talking about this, our narrative being crushed, and our discourse never being released fully to its full
Right.
potential,
Right.
it just brings me again, to put it very literally, as Miss Gayatri Spivak would say, then can the subaltern speak really?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if the
it's time
answer
for
is
us to
yes, and if the answer is yes, then how does the subaltern really speak? And how do you get that long subdued affiliation that we as colonized have been looking for in terms of our historical narrative, historical discourse, even our education system? I mean, even today, like we are struggling with knickknacks of little things, and we're just gradually into changing little things, but still the root, it remains there. So how does a subaltern really do that?
um, we have to get these myths out of the history. I have worked extensively on the beginnings of Indian history.
Hmm.
I have written on settlement patterns of ancient India and based on archaeological sources. And almost 10 years ago, I have written another research work on genetic history and what it shows.
Hmm.
Um, it's important to note that um, all the research, all the excavations conducted on the ground, and genetic history doesn't show any invasions, doesn't show anybody coming from anywhere. So, the Aryan invasion myth is just a myth. So the beginnings of Indian history had always been attributed to this some mythical groups coming from
Yes.
somewhere. But if some group came in, they should leave their mark somewhere. It should be either on the ground in archaeological sites where they lived or where they occupied. If they occupied some place, they should have taken over the city. So the city should be
Yes.
destroyed and a new city or new place should be built over it. If it should show a difference, different pottery, different, so it doesn't show anything like that. And
You're
genetic
blowing me off. You're blowing me off. Please continue.
and genetic history, of course, shows continuity. And India is founder's zone because
Hmm.
Africa had this, the anatomically modern humans, of course, dated to about 200,000 years ago. But Africa has African lines that are not found anywhere else. Non African lines actually come from these founders' zones, founder lines. For male lines, the African lines are A and B. The next one is C, and it is found only in India, and it dates to about 74,000, 73,000 years ago. And all non-African lines actually derive from later mutations from this line. And same with the female genetic lines. African lines are female lines are L, and Indian, the next oldest line is in India, which is M. So other genetic lines, M is found a lot in India, of course, and N and R are also found in India. So a lot of these are in India. All the mutations, all the later. So the point is, India is at the node of human populations of the world by being the founder's zone, by having the oldest genetic lines. The genetics can be understood from two ways. It can be understood from skeletons found in archaeological sites, and it can also be understood from living populations. So, from living populations of India as well as the rest of the world, lots of living populations have donated their anyway for the genetic research. So it has been mapped out. So the map has established the root is in India. So it's called the founder's zone. So it's a founder's zone, and it shows continuity from 74,000 years ago onwards. It's upper Paleolithic period. From upper Paleolithic onwards, Paleolithic also there is continuity, but from Upper Paleolithic you can see it very clearly. From Upper Paleolithic there is this temples, goddess temple found at one of the sites in Bagor, and from Upper Paleolithic the continuity is seen in the Bhimbetka caves. The paintings are seen from late Upper Paleolithic archaeological remains, as well as until historical period. So it's not different people occupying the same place, but it's the same people continuing in the same place, progressing within their culture. You could see the differences and cultural evolution in sites like Bhimbetka. You can find, Upper Paleolithic, Mesolithic, subsequent paintings up to the historical period. So we can understand the historical progress of India from Upper Paleolithic onwards. Of course, Paleolithic onwards, the early foundations to the modern era, and none of the archaeological sites that were excavated don't show any sudden destruction, or don't show any sudden occupation. If there is a sudden occupation, there is a sudden change, and there are also suddenly profusion of weapons. So there is no site like that until now, from all the sites that have been excavated. So any invaders coming, the beginning of Indian history itself is a myth that is given to us for a long time, and we are still reading this invaders versus
Yeah.
indigenous, and this actually influences every aspect of our education system. That
Right.
continues with every aspect, the religion, the language. The Indian languages are not Indian languages. They were brought by these mythical invaders. Indian history, Indian religion is not, it's brought by the invaders. Who are these invaders? Where are they? We don't see them anywhere. How come we don't see them anywhere? And we only see, gradual progress. So,
I think that's the beauty of discourse, and that's the beauty of history. I mean, you make any story up and you say it for a quite a long period of time, and people start believing in it. I mean, and I would want to remind our
but this
viewers here
this
that
Aryan myth is so strange.
it is.
Without any evidence, it still survives. I don't know how it survives.
Definitely, and I would not have asked for a better person to bust this, all these myths in terms of invasion, in terms of history, in terms of curriculum. There's no better person than you. I would want to remind everybody that Dr. Lavanya is a PhD in history. She's also a PhD in religious studies, and she's a professor in the Department of Social Sciences in Shawnee State University, USA. And ladies and gentlemen, she's also president of Ohio Academy of History. So, well, she's talking facts, everybody. And apart from that, she's also a co-founder of American Academy of Indic Studies and an editor-in-chief of American Journal of Indian Studies. So, we have a very, very, well-read and well-researched person with us, talking about history and how these things mature and materialize in our minds over time, right? And taking that very issue forward, that again comes to the idea of representation, right? So if my foundation is not clear in my head, we have all these narratives floating up which really don't have a foundation, just as you said. So history, it becomes very, very important, extremely crucial. And it's right that it's definitely the biggest tool of the third generation warfare. So how does it really affect uh, India or Indian generation in this new age information warfare, that's been going on? Like, how do I educate myself, or how do I probably protect myself from all these, invisible invaders, if there were any?
No. It's strange, but thank you. It's a great question. The framework of invaders versus indigenous is imposed on every aspect of Indian culture: religion, language, and way of life. So, because it is portrayed on every aspect of Indian life, that's what is seen outside. Uh, when you talk about India, that's what is taught about India outside and as well as in India. In India, of course, we have already forgotten our mind is influenced. So we are thinking about this. We are divided into these Aryans, non-Aryans, and our languages, our books are also written. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, all these are seen as books of the invaders. The story itself is changed as invaders versus indigenous. The demons, the monsters that are described in the books are considered to be indigenous, which is not true. It's all the same stories describing, the some cosmological events. Some these are all allegorical stories
They
representing
probably wanted a villain, isn't it?
Hindu ethics. Right? Hindu ethics.
And the invader happened to be one.
so 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 the population itself is divided into these two sections. One of them is indigenous, one of them is non-indigenous, and non-indigenous doesn't really exist. There is no connection for this non-indigenous to come and give the stories or do anything. But this is what goes outside, this is what is in India, and this is what influences the minds. And recently, this has been taking uh, it's appearing in different forms. The Hindu phobia, actually, the Hindu phobia is based on this misinterpretation of Indian texts as well as Indian history based on this Aryan invasion. So the festivals, if you're celebrating the festival, or if you're being a traditional Hindu, you're considered this invader, this marauder who had been come from somewhere to influence this nation that was really great before the arrival. So on American campuses, simply celebrating the festival of Holi becomes a contentious issue, because Holi is interpreted as an imposition of these invading marauders on the indigenous. All festivals are interpreted like this, and of course, this doesn't stay in a smaller form, and it accomplishes and multiplies and becomes a larger Hindu phobia. What it is doing is it's presenting this manipulated story, and it is presenting Hindus, traditional Hindus, as someone. It's not true, but it's presenting them as bad, as invaders, as imposers, as being bad. Sometime in the past, we don't know when that past is or how it happened, but it's isolating groups of Hindus in the West as well as in India, uh, which is not a good development for anybody. Any group, any ethnic group that is socially or ideologically isolated gets labeled and then name called, and then it results in physical attacks and being traumatized. Traumatization is only the first phase. The next phase actually leads to physical attacks and further dangers, can also lead to genocides. Genocides actually don't begin all of a sudden. It actually begins in ideological developments, isolation. It actually starts with words. So the colonial narratives, of course, they were in the books and they influenced the minds of Indians. But now, in the recent years, it has come out of the books. It has come out into public sphere, and it's influencing the public perception of Hindus, which is not optimal because it's actually based on this narrative of indigenous invaders versus the indigenous. Of course, the invaders were not there, but where is this true history of India? The true history of India is not there yet. The history that is still being taught in the books is still indigenous versus the invaders. The invaders story is still there. The invaders story is still affecting the perceptions, and it is causing dangers. It's actually pushing India and Hindus especially into danger. It's actually leading to Hindu phobia as well as Indophobia. There is, Indians in general face this because when this phobia develops, it's not going to ask your name or ask who it is. It's not going to see who is the invader, who is the indigenous. It's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect the whole country. So it's important that this type of artificial narratives are countered.
I mean, it's good that you brought Indophobia and Hinduphobia in our discussion because I was recently watching some interaction of Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and he said that he was really into theatrical, and then he left it because he had to pursue his studies abroad, and went forth for his first play, and he was given the role of some old man in his early 20s because he said, well, the white man had to play the hero, right? And it's it pains you that people who've been celebrated bureaucrats, who've been celebrated in academia, in parliaments, in bureaucracy, and here they are and leaving theatrical because they were not supposed to play the main part. I'm actually reminded of a very, very well-known professor. She was pursuing her higher studies somewhere abroad, and her classmates actually mustered up the courage and came to her one day, and they said, well, we hear you used to go to school on the back of a tiger. And she was so furious, she actually told him, yes, I did. So, this is how, these things, it definitely can lead to isolation and so much of misappropriation
Mhm.
that's still so much in here in
Mhm.
front of us. I mean, people are still telling stories and anecdotes about it.
Right.
And it's and now coming on to since you've been talking about civilization and of your archaeological surveys, so definitely your research and publication on disproving this whole idea of Aryan invasion and migration theory, that's very well known. So we would want to like to know that what is how is this actually unraveling now, and the very semantics of this word. Let's start with the very semantics of the word Aryan, and what's its linkage, what's its connotation, how am I supposed to perceive it in today's times.
Right. The words Aryan and Dravidian, both of them are artificial. They're not races. Our books, the Vedas or any of the traditional texts, don't mention these as races. The word Arya is not even Aryan. It's Arya is used for as a respectable term. If you're referring to somebody as sir, you would call them Arya, and in South India you would call them Ayya. It's like calling somebody sir. So a respect, a word that it's an adjective became a noun by making it into Aryan. Same with Dravida. Dravida is
And
used.
same happened with sahabs as well,
Yeah,
sahabs and babus.
yeah. So if we call baboon and say it's a race, how absurd that would be. So these categories are equally absurd. They're manipulated words, but there is no evidence. The linguistic evidence, of course, the words, the morphology, linguistic morphology has a issue with understanding history, and many nations in Asia actually rejected this theory. China actually rejects this language morphology to understand linguistic history. So Asian languages work a little bit different, and Asian word roots. Of course, Paninian grammar is one of the earliest linguistic works in the world, and it discusses the origin of the words and how it works in Indian languages. And all Indian languages were based on Paninian grammar. So, regardless of the place they are, I come from South India. Telugu also uses the same grammatical constructions and language roots like Sanskrit. So Paninian grammar actually forms basis for all Indian languages. So, linguistic morphology, of course, it's questionable. It's been rejected by many. So we leave it aside because there is no point in discussing something that is already known as mythical, and there is no word called Aryan as a race. So leave it aside, and there is no evidence anywhere else either. So
But since you're, telling us how, people have had a hard time digesting this fact, including myself and probably the viewers as well. So, what have been the major challenges apart from people rejecting it on your faces? What have been the challenges in this particular quest of debunking this, age-old theory of Aryan invasion and Aryan migration? These things they've shaped up other migration theories as well. I mean, farming communities and whatnot. So, what have been those major critical challenges in the process?
the Aryan theory was so established, so entrenched. It was difficult initially to argue against it. Very few people went against the established theory. Uh, but now, though, now because we have archaeological research, India has been covered. Archaeological sites have been excavated across India. So we have evidence from archaeological sources and also the genetics. The genetics has been mapped. So in the last 10 years, there is a mountain of evidence showing the spuriousness of this theory. Before though, before because it's based on linguistic morphology, and linguistic morphology, India hasn't rejected it yet. Other countries have rejected it. So the words can be twisted either way. There is no way you can find a real uh, path forward. But because of archaeology, recent archaeology has brought out important excavations. You might have also followed this Sinauli excavations. Remember, chariots were excavated, number of skeletons were excavated. And this site is actually one of the Harappan sites. Harappan sites with chariot and skeletons disproves anybody coming in and introducing chariots. It's already there. It's prior to the date of these invasions that are dated between the mythical Aryans are supposed to have come between 1900 BCE to 1500 BCE, but the Sinauli site is prior to that. So the information that comes from the area is before that. Of course, India has a number of Harappan cultural sites, Indus Valley sites. It's better to call it Sindhu Saraswati Valley civilization. It is because it's not just Harappa, and it is extensive. It is the largest ancient civilizations of the world. It actually spread from Oxus River Valley all the way to Narmada River. So its extent is really, really large, and it spreads in the west, all the way to Balochistan, in the east, all the way to Uttar Pradesh. So it's a largest extent. If you are looking at other contemporary civilizations like Egyptian civilization or Mesopotamia, they are very, very small in comparison with Indus Valley civilization. And the cities were closely located, and the population is large. Some of the cities, as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro at some time in their life, might have held more than 60,000 of people. So these are larger cities and spread over large extent. If you're trying to imagine how large it is larger than modern France. It's the just the nuclear area of
Right.
the just the Punjab in Pakistan and India would be that large. So imagine it spread from Oxus to Narmada River and on the east towards Uttar Pradesh. So it's that large. So for that large civilization to be taken over, to be overtaken and destroyed by some marauder. So there should have been so many weapons. There should have been so many invaders to come.
And now I feel dumb as a student. Why did I believe into it in the first place?
Yeah, which is not there. Which is not there in
Right.
all the sites that were excavated. And I studied southern India.
Okay.
They say the migrations happened in the north, and then people migrated to the south. No such changes can be seen in the south. The sites, archaeological sites excavated in the south, also show continuity from Paleolithic era. They don't show any new people coming or new pottery coming or new weapons coming. No, the sites don't show anything. So this idea of invasions is not true. And the Indus Valley sites, archaeological sites as well as genetic sites, of course, genetic history establishes this fact. So you were asking about how can we believe this, right? Yeah, I don't know how can we believe this. how was it imposed on us? There is
And
no evidence for it anywhere.
probably in the same way how we were told that the sun never sets on the
I
that
know.
the sun never sets on the west.
Yeah, they brought it and introduced into the books, and we
Right.
haven't taken our time to counter it or take it out of the textbooks. It's still continuing. Is surprising. There is no evidence, and it still continues. It's a sad state of affairs for
Hell,
us.
so many authors and so many, philosophers are going to lose their bread and butter once they get to you and we start changing it up. Well, I feel sorry for them. Moving on. Just kidding. Moving on. Since we're creating this void, with this imaginary Aryan race being rejected because on solid grounds. So, how do I, as a layman, a laywoman who does not understand history so much and, who's not as well read as you are. So, how do I associate Vedic civilization with what you would like to call the Sindhu Saraswati civilization? Like, how do I bridge both these things? How do I associate them in terms of lifestyle, in terms of language, and standard of living?
Right. You know, let me clear one misunderstanding at the outset before we go on into discussing
Right.
this. Um, uh,
Another truth bomb, guys. Another truth bomb.
what is Harappan? What is the Sindhu Saraswati? Or what is the Vedic? They talk as if these two are separate and distinct and
Right.
different, but both of them are the same region. When we say Indus Valley, we're saying the region. We're not saying the people, right? When we're saying Vedic, we're saying the people. So the Indus Valley, of course, we find the archaeological source, the sites and how they lived and all that. And when we read the Vedas, of course, we hear their voice. But both of them are talking about the same region. So when
Right.
we say Indus Valley, we're talking about the region, and we're talking, when we say Vedas, we're talking about the people. But it's the same region. Vedas talk about the same region. That's the Sindhu Saraswati, the Oxus River. Oxus River is Akshur
Right.
Nadi. So so same rivers, and same region, same information. And do we know? Did they say anything about being different, or did they mention any of these names and say, that is the different race, this is a different race? No. And Vedic texts are mystical texts. They are divine messages. They are actually classified as um, you know the texts that were heard, not written.
Right, right,
So
right.
Vedic texts are very cryptic, and they have these mystical messages. And as is common with Indian civilization, the sages and ascetics don't live within the culture. They actually leave the culture and live outside of the culture. So the culture might be represented sometimes in their mystical representations or in their writings, but it's not a complete picture. They're giving a picture. There might be some picture, but it's a cryptic picture. It's not a full representation. So when they're talking about Vedic people, they're it's an assumed term. And when they're talking about Harappan or Indus Valley people, it's an assumed term. Do we know these two people are different? We don't. They didn't tell us. And Indus Valley, we haven't read the seals. So how do we know,
Right.
they're different? We don't. And evidence shows that there were no wars, they didn't go against each other or anything like that. And Vedas, of course, they're composed by sages who lived outside of the culture. So they're not writing about culture, they're only composing their own mystical revelations. So it's not fully representative of culture. So you cannot say this is full culture of India or outside India. um,
It's
it
incredible.
might appear because they are mystical revelations recorded by the sages. It might appear as they don't belong to anything. They don't belong to anything as it is. The ascetics and sages are outside of the culture. They are writing only their divine revelations. They're not writing about the culture that they see around them. So of course, it's easy to assume they're outsiders and they imposed their
It
culture.
really is.
But
A sincere note before you continue, ma'am. A sincere note to my history teacher. I'm coming to you after this session. Please continue.
so the evidence has to be put together, the Vedic evidence as well as archaeological evidence, as well as other evidence that we can find from the culture. You can see the culture and work backwards, just like the genetics. You can see the present people and construct the genetics backwards. So similarly, you can also understand the cultural evolution. Because Indian history had been written from outsiders, they haven't understood the nature of Indian culture. So if we try to understand Indian history from Indian perspectives, for example, Vedas being divine revelations of the sages rather than books written for common people, right? It doesn't represent the life of society as it is. It only represents cryptic information.
Right.
So if you
So,
understand it from the Indian perspective, what it means in India, the sources, the literary sources as well as archaeological sources, if cultural sources, if they are understood and they are examined from Indian perspectives, of course, Indian history will come out. Indian history will be released from its captivity, and that's the way
absolutely.
forward. Yeah.
I think it's great that you pointed out, how the very origin of decoding our own origin, the very start of it is problematic because it's been, through an outsider's gaze. And I'm reminded of, how I think it was Karl Marx who visited India and, heard Kanuman in place of Hanuman, and he just bent back. I might be, wrong, but there was some person from the West who came and, he said probably, they worship animals. I mean, they're feeding them, they're worshiping them, and there's some person called Kanuman that they're very crazy about. I mean, so the outside gaze, I mean, it's so problematic to start with, and then we've started writing history books on it, and then we started believing it all of a sudden, and here we are. So since we're talking of invasion and migration and the entire myth around it, so there's also been in the historical context, if we see, there's been a, a very long stretch of time, around 600 years of Islamic rule on major parts of Indian subcontinent. So, they've been marked again, they've been appropriated with so much violence, conversions, bloodshed, destruction of temples and massacres and, the flight of deities and all of that. So, you know, how do you feel about it? So, since the idea of invasion itself is so problematic, so, where does that again help us land at? So, is this Islamic influence? Are we trying to? Are we already misled? Are we doing it consciously, or just this exceptional cases from history? They've just been inflated just to have some sort of exaggeration. And how can we neutralize this, or probably look at it with a better gaze, with a better historical awareness? How do we look at this so that we don't get into even a larger communal divide, which comes with the whole drama of it? So, how do we perceive that?
Right. Oh, Indian history is full of myths, right? For the first part of history, ancient history, the myth is, the Aryan invasion, which is not true. And for the second part of history, the second millennial history, beginning with, 12th century, the myth is invasions might have happened, but the damage is not real. So,
Oh, oh.
of course, you see, all of us, I don't think any of us who have grown up in India would not have noticed the destruction. The destroyed temples are all around us. I actually grew up, I told you, I grew up in Telangana, Hyderabad.
Mhm.
And it has been ruled by Islamic generals as sultans for only a short period, not as long as it had been in the north, but still the destruction is all around us. The largest and the best temple in Telangana, the thousand pillar temple, is still in ruins. It's being revived now, but it's still in ruins. Anybody that visits the thousand pillar temple would leave with pain. It's destroyed. It's a beautiful, beautiful, large thousand pillar temple. And of course, any other places you visit in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, of course, the Narasimha temple in it's not just the sultans that destroyed, it's their mercenaries, it's their generals, their chiefs, their anybody that's ruling in the area would go ahead and destroy anything that's around them. So the Narasimha temple in Khammam was destroyed and only revived in the 20th century. And there is a large Narasimha temple in Dharmapuri, which was destroyed and rebuilt, and then destroyed and rebuilt. So it's uh, anywhere around, you would see this destruction, the Islamic invasions and the occupations, and then destroyed temples and destroyed capitals. The Kakatiya capital in Warangal was completely destroyed. And the only thing that remains is just the gateway of the fort. The fort was completely destroyed, razed down to the ground. So you can see the destruction. And probably you remember the Kohinoor diamond, right? The Kohinoor diamond was actually
Yes, yes, yes.
here from Hanmakonda, from the goddess temple, Bhadrakali temple, by Malik Kafur.
Yes.
And then it was taken by the Iranians. Of course, it has a long story of how it landed in the British crown. But so the destruction is unimaginable, and it's well known, and it's recorded in the works of Islamic invaders themselves. They were quite boastful, quite proud of their destruction, and they recorded it. But Indian history, because it's not based on facts, right? It tries to change the story of invasions. So the textbooks and Indian history writing tries to muffle down these invasions, the effects of these invasions, and destruction of the temples, and tries to not represent them in the textbooks. I really think it's important that the history is fact based and truthful, represent all aspects of Indian history truthfully, because it's important to have truth. If there is no truth, there is no reconciliation. People talk about, that will disturb the peace. It will disturb the peace. You cannot hide facts for a long time. If you keep on hiding them, it can burst out and be more dangerous. It will be a big threat. So it's important to bring out the facts, and truth and reconciliation go hand in hand. It's important to have this reconciliation. It's important to bring out the facts. It's important that we understand and we live with the facts and truth, rather than you know rather than muffle the truth and not understand our past. It's important that we understand and we reconcile our past. So it's important for everybody.
But that again, it just at the end, while we're wrapping this up, there's behind a nation, there's so much of historical and cultural affiliation involved that it's very difficult to probably get rid of those myths, right? Even with this particular curriculum that we have, even with people like you, even with constructive discussions and interactions. So, how do I perceive a nation whose history has not probably been unleashed yet, but I need something to fall back on? So, what should that be up till the truth is not out? I mean, that baffles me.
Right. It it's difficult to live with this trauma and untruthful history. So, for young minds, I understand you're reading these things, and of course media sensationalizes these issues, but I'm really happy the media is bringing these things out, and laying them out for young people to see. But until it is resolved, for young people, read widely, read more, and don't just go with the established narrative. The established narrative of Indian history had been ridden with faults, too many errors. So it's important to learn widely and read widely. Once you read widely, of course, the truth comes out. As more young people are open to learn, open to read more, truth comes out, and I'm sure this will change the perspective on Indian history, and hopefully it will lead to the change in Indian history. It becomes a true representative of India, rather than it, it, we are all for fact-based history. We're not for, we're not asking for anything here. We are only asking for fact-based history. Bring out the facts. Bring out the truth. Bring out information that is true into Indian history, and it will take its own course. It's important for young people. It's important for nation to learn its true history. Without its true history, the progress is difficult. So it's
So
important
we've
for
been, we've
widely.
been we've been deliberating over, how our education has been working, how it has been equipping us for employability with, the new education policy coming up and all these measures being taken. So, what do you feel as a historian, as somebody who's very much into, social sciences? So, you are a part of a great institution yourself. So, how do you feel that, what is probably the most crucial loophole that you find in Indian education system, or how can we come up with a better curriculum in future? What could be done in that sector?
I cannot talk about other subjects, engineering or math or other subjects, sciences. But for
You
humanity,
left me with trust issues in history alone. I'm not prepared for all the subjects, ma'am.
so it's important for everyone, be it somebody studying math or studying technology or studying medicine. It's important to know the basic history. The knowing the basic history of the country gives one a grounding. Without that grounding, it's the as Ambedkar said, the spirit is lacking, the soul is lacking. So it's of course, it remains, the mind is under wrapped in a mythical stories, right? So the true discovery of self is not possible. Of course, they might achieve progress in science, math, or all these things, but something is still lacking in the soul and spirit. So it's important for everyone, whatever the subject may be. It's important for them to know the actual true history, the truth of their being, the truth of their soul, the truth of their country. Um, uh, so halfway history is, it causes a societal trauma. The younger generation, we have grown. Our generation has grown in this traumatized past, and the modern generation is still growing up with this same history, which is sad. It has to be changed. It has to undergo change. That's for sure. Whatever subject they're studying, it's important for them to know the true history of their country.
So probably learning and unlearning is the key here. I think that would be my takeaway from the whole conversation today. And probably I think we've gone far longer than what was envisaged in the beginning. That's because I've been thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being a part of this little interaction that we just had. I've had a great time talking to you, and I hope you felt the same. Any ending notes, any remarks regarding the whole thing, that would be appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much, Sheenam. My ending words, of course, for history. Please, please change history. Make it true fact-based history of India.
Well, we hope that happens as
Yeah.
soon as possible, and we hope we can be, the driving agents for change and transformation in that field. Thank you so much, ma'am. I wish my viewers a great evening. Thank you
Thank
so much for joining us here.
you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye. Take care.